And maybe to give a little preview of some of the hopscotching around we'll be doing with the recorded career of Coltrane, you'll hear us checking out a wide range of material with Wynton Marsalis, who's kind of low-keyed about it, but there's no doubt in my mind that there's a little kid in the candy store going on for both of us. I've only been in a room a few times, mostly the last 2 weeks, where every John Coltrane record is present, and it's all here. And someone who hears it well and has listened to it wisely is Wynton Marsalis. Thank you for joining us on the John Coltrane Festival.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here.
We were talking about what recordings of great interest to us. I see you neatly fondling the Duke Ellington and John Coltrane record, so I'll just start talking about that one. It was a rare embarrassment for my good friend, lifelong buddy, Dr. Aaron Bell. He was late for a record date.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't feel good about that, especially considering the magnitude of the event. I always thought it was well designed in that the two protagonists were each equipped with their own rhythm section. I mean, McCoy wasn't going to be there, much as Billy Kyle wasn't going to be there the previous year for Duke and Louie. And that the rhythm sections grouped as a pair, except on one song, where Aaron Bell's the bassist and Elvin Jones the drummer, and that's on probably the most amazing version of In a Sentimental Mood, if you want to isolate one of them. Duke rarely isolated a tune, but he said that was his favorite ballad. So I guess what I'm saying, trying to be as concise as Phil Schaap can possibly be about this album, is thank heavens it happened. And that once it was designed to happen, it seems a wise way to go, to let you hear Ellington as a player in that regard on somewhat equal footing as Coltrane, and that the rhythm sections were each represented, and that at least in one instance they split the difference, and you had Duke's bassist and Coltrane's drummer. I have a few more things I could say, as always, but what would Marsalis like to say about Duke Ellington and John Coltrane?
Well, I think that it was just an interesting meeting of musicians from different generations and times. I think a lot more is made out of that when it's written down than the actuality of the musicians coming together. I remember once McCoy told me that Louis Armstrong came to see Coltrane in the 60s in Chicago. He said, man, this was one of those nights that we were way out there. And he said that first, Pops was like a king. He said just the response of the people around to the presence of Armstrong and his greatness. And he said, of course, they were all like kids. He said, and Train walked up to Pops and was, of course, very humble. And they were so honored. He said, Pops said, yeah, you boys sound good. And I think that just Coltrane, the way that he looked at Ellington, we got to remember that here's somebody who grew up listening to jazz records, who knew about Duke, and all of the musicians at that time had such tremendous respect for Duke, and for Coltrane to have the opportunity to play and record with Duke probably was such an honor for him. And Duke was one of the type of musicians, so even though he was older, he kept his ears to the ground, and he had tremendous respect for Coltrane and his talent. And when those two bands came together, when both trios came together, it was just full of love and respect. Aaron Bell, I spoke with him even about the session. He was like, man, Elvin, Jimmy Garrison, I mean, he just the love is evident on the session. And as I like a lot, every song on here I love, but I like Duke's solution to certain problems, like a way that he will approach something with a little different changes, or something like Big Nick, or he addresses tunes in different ways. But I love the feeling of jazz, just because of the melody and the flow and the sweep of it. And Stevie is hip too, minor blues. I mean, with Train, he's on such a high spiritual level, and he had practiced his horn so much, and it reached such a level of such a height of expression. And they're just playing with the master. Ellington pushed him to another level, and it shows more than anything how people come together in jazz, because they play very different styles, if you look at it technically, on the Coltrane always playing a lot in minor keys, and Elvin with the way he interpreted the beat, and Coltrane playing the long, long solos, and Duke coming up in the era where people played for 5 minutes was forever. But we got to also remember that Duke Ellington wrote the Tattooed Bride in the late 40s, 47.
Yeah.
And that has a long, long stretch of minor, like a minor mode. And Jelly Roll Morton with the Jungle Blues was writing on a mode before anybody. So with Duke and Train, we see like a lot of the places did the music in a sex. So I think if we could just check out Stevie, we could hear them addressing minor blues.
Well, I don't need the booklet. I need the CD.
Oh, okay.
All right. You're listening to Wynton Marsalis, and he's commentating on recordings of John Coltrane, including a legendary one with Duke Ellington of September 26, 1962. And this is Stevie for one of Duke's nephews, Stephen James. We might mention with some condolence for the James brothers, the loss of their mother, Ruth, Duke's sister. And this is the John Coltrane Festival, with a live interview going on here at 626 with Wynton Marsalis. From Duke Ellington's collaborations with John Coltrane, we heard Stevie, a dedication piece that was for Stephen James, Duke's nephew, and Big Nick, which was a John Coltrane composition and also a dedication piece. We're here in the studio with Wynton Marsalis, who has joined us for the John Coltrane Festival. It's 25 before 7. I'm Phil Schaap. It's fascinating to me about Big Nick, and I understood when Wynton spoke about things that people say that, you know, there's little basis, let's say, for some of the revisiting of events that no one alive attended, but they all think about and think that they heard the conversations. I'm probably as guilty as anyone.